Say hello to my favorite budget deck. Hello and welcome to the table, and today I'm going to be going over Dorinthea Ironsong, the queen of budget CC games. I don't really know what to give this deck, like what title to give to this deck, but I absolutely love Dorinthea Ironsong. I love her deck. I love warriors, and she's my second favorite warrior in the game, and I've been wanting to make a really good budget deck with her for a long time, and this is that. So, let's get into things, and surprisingly enough, this is a $160 deck, even though it has a legendary, a majestic Courage of Blade hold, and some really powerful majestic staples like Spoils of War, and some others that we'll get to here in a second. But let's go over Dorinthea, all the equipment, and of course her weapon Dawnblade, and then go over the main deck and the sideboard in the end. Dorinthea Ironsong is just a 4 intellect, 40 health warrior hero from the very first set, Welcome to Wraith, with the simple once per turn effect of when a weapon you control hits, you may attack an additional time with that weapon, so long as you have an action point. I mean, simple enough. If you get Dawnblade to hit, you get to attack with it again, permitting the Dawnblade go again. And Dawnblade, just so you know, is a 1-cost weapon to attack with for 3 damage, but if it hits, and it's the second time it is hit this turn, you put a +1 power counter on Dawnblade, so it gets a little bit bigger. And at the beginning of your end phase, if Dawnblade has not hit this turn, you remove all the +1 power counters from Dawnblade. So it's a little bit of a blowout if you're playing against a deck that wants to just go super uber defensive mode, which a certain very powerful deck in the meta right now named Enigma is very good at doing. So this deck isn't great, but don't worry, I got some options in the sideboard where it actually becomes a lot more plausible to beat Enigma than you would think, especially for a budget deck. But Dawnblade is just a super powerful weapon. It is the thing that the whole deck is built around. Basically, giving this thing go again, buffing it to the moon, and ensuring that you can get that +1 power counter, and then just overwhelm the opponent. And the equipment also really helps you with that, and it's a bit of a fridge, so that helps too. To start things off, I got the legendary Braveforge Bracers. Absolutely love this piece of equipment. It's a 2-block Battle-Worn arms piece, and it has the once per turn action for 1 resource. That gives your next weapon attack this turn, +1 power, permitting that you've attacked with that weapon, and it's hit this turn. So, I mean, basically, you get a little bit of a buff, and sure, it's 1 resource to get 1 buff 1 time, permitting that you've done certain things, but it actually does a lot more than you would think. Getting that extra power can actually do a lot more than you would think. And the 2 Battle-Worn, I mean, that helps too. Like, this can block for 2 once, and then for 1 again, and then throughout the rest of the game, it's just little binks of extra damage here and there for 1 resource that can add up incredibly quickly. Then there's Courage of Blade hold, the absolute combo enabler of the deck. This deck can go really, really wide. It can attack with Dawnblade 3 times, permitting that you've done some setup pretty easily. And you can even do it more than that if you've got some other cards, if you've drawn some other cards and draw extra cards in a turn. But Courage of Blade hold is the card that allows you to do all that, because Courage of Blade hold is a 2-block with temper, so you can block with it for 2 once, but if you want to block with it for 1 again, it will blow up, unlike the Braveforge Bracers, because it has temper. And as an action, you can destroy it and give your sword attacks this turn 1 less cost. So I should say your Dawnblade now costs nothing to attack with, which is really powerful, simply put. Then there is Helm of the Sharp Eye. This is a 1-block headpiece with Battle-Worn, and as an attack reaction, you can spend a resource, blow it up, and banish the top card of your deck. And you can play the card that you just banished, this Combat Chain, only if you've control a weapon with power greater than twice its base, which, I mean, realistically, is not very hard to do in this deck, so it's not really that big of a cost to pay. Then there is Refraction Bolters. This is just a get-out-of-jail-free card. It's not the best piece of equipment in the world, but it's still pretty powerful, all things considered. It's a 1-block Battle-Worn, and when a weapon you control hits, you can blow up the refraction bolters and give that attack go again. It's basically allowing you, like, if you don't have any way to give Dawnblade go again, you can block with this and blow it up, and boom, now Dorinthea is online, and you can attack with Dawnblade a second time and potentially get that +1 power counter on Dawnblade. So, then getting into the main deck, it's just attack actions and non-attack actions, ways to enable go again, all that kind of good stuff. I'm just gonna go over the the non-attack actions and just kind of generally what they're gonna be doing, and I'll get into the reactions and generally what they're doing. So to start things off, I got hit and run. Not the best, but I mean, 0 cost, gets your thing go again. Maybe it gives your weapon an additional +3 power if you've attacked with something already this turn. That's basically never gonna go off. Basically, you play it and it gets free go again on your next thing. It's fine. Then going down the line, you got stuff like Spoils of War, giving your next weapon a little bit of a buff, some go again, the ability for you to get some copper tokens, potentially. Steelblade Supremacy is one of the few non-attack actions in the deck. I actually think it's the only non-attack action in the deck that doesn't give your weapon go again, but it is what can allow you to attack with your weapon potentially more than 3 times in a turn, because it gives the weapon a +2 power buff for the rest of the turn, and the effect, whenever it hits, you draw a card. So it puts a lot more pressure on your weapon, and it makes your opponent really want to make sure that that doesn't hit and block with more cards, and it just can force a lot more blocks out of your opponent and completely shut down their next turn. So the card's very powerful. Then there is Unsheathed, which essentially is just go again. Your next sword attack gets +3 power, and when it attacks, it has power greater than twice its base, it gets go again. Because Dawnblade has 3 power, you play Unsheathed, and then boom, you basically get free go again and a +3 power buff on Dawnblade, which is kind of cracked at 0 resources, so you take that. You take that. And then there's Warrior's Valor, which is essentially the same thing as Unsheathed, but it costs 1 more resource, and it's only if the weapon hits, it gets go again. You get the +3 power buff on Dawnblade no matter what, even if it doesn't have greater than twice its base power or whatever, but it's got to hit in order to get go again. So Warrior's Valor is still very powerful, but it's not as good as Unsheathed. To be fair, it's a Majestic versus a Rare, so there is that. Then there is Glistening Steelblade, go again, and then instead of giving a buff, non-permanent buff, it says whenever a Dawnblade hits a hero this turn, you put a +1 power counter on it. So it's permanent buffs until, of course, Dawnblade's thing goes off, but still, Glistening Steelblade is an incredibly powerful card. I mean, it's one of the most powerful cards in the entire deck. It might be just the most powerful card in the entire deck, if you look at it. There's a reason it's so expensive. Then there is Ironsong Determination. This is the other non-attack action that doesn't give go again, but it gives your weapon +1 power and dominate for the entirety of that turn, which is also nuts and can allow you to do some stupid combo stuff too, because giving your thing dominate, your weapon dominate, can essentially guarantee you to hit with said weapon, which is awesome. So there's that. Then going further down the line, basically the rest of the non-attack actions in the deck are just blues. Driving Blade, if you really need it, it can get some go again. Otherwise, it's just a blue 3 block. Goblet of Blood Run Wine, potential go again later on and a little bit of resource. Otherwise, it's a blue 2 block. Hit and Run, blue, same thing as the red, just blue. And then there's Warrior's Valor blue, which is the same thing, but blue. And yeah. Then getting into the attack reaction side of the deck, it's essentially just wanting to buff your weapon, and hey, if you're blocking something from your hand, my weapon's actually going to come in for this much, so F your block. Ironsong Response is one of the best cards that kind of does this. It's like, alright, I'm the opponent right now, and I'm blocking Dawnblade for 3, and then boom, you play Ironsong Response, and then that 3 block that they just put onto your Dawnblade, well, Ironsong Response is just taking that and saying, I'm going to add that to my weapon instead. So it's just like, it gives a +3 power buff to your weapon if your opponent is blocked with something from their hand, which is nuts. It's just buff. It's good. For 0 resources especially, it's just really good. Out for Blood is sort of a better Ironsong response because sure, it costs one more resource, but no matter what, your weapon's getting +3 power. And if the opponent blocks with something from their hand, it gets an additional power, which is something to note, and it could be powerful. Could be powerful. Then there is Overpower as a 2-of. This is just a really powerful version of Out for Blood. If you really need this in a pinch, like, it is there for you. It can do some serious work for you. You pitch a blue, you gave your weapon +4 power, which is a lot. And then if your opponent blocked with something from their hand, it actually gets 6 power instead, which is nuts. So, I mean, yeah, it's a little bit good. It's a little bit good, especially as an attack reaction. Then Route as a 1-of. This card is basically just a little bit of disruption. It gives your weapon a little bit of a buff, and if the opponent is defending with something from their hand, you basically just get to bounce the thing that they're blocking with back to their hand. So it's just taking the thing that they are blocking with and then just bringing it right back to them. It's awesome. It's just amazing. It's amazing. It's a good 1-of. You don't really want it besides that, beyond that 1-of, but still, very powerful. Then the other reactions in a deck, Run Through. It's one of the few reactions that actually gives Go Again. It doesn't give a power buff at all. It can give a power buff later on. It gives your next sword attack +2 power, which is why it's only a 1-of. Also because it just doesn't give a buff immediately. But it's still powerful by all means, because it is still a yellow, which can matter. And it's a 3 block, which is also can matter sometimes. But it's still fine. But it's not as good as other stuff. Then Singing Steelblade, one of the better cards in the deck, and actually it's a insanely powerful card for the Enigma matchup because it can get some a card that we'll talk about here in a minute. But Singing Steelblade is effectively attack reaction tutor. It's a 1-cost Dorinthea specialization. It gives a weapon +1 power. And if the opponent's blocked with something from their hand, you get to search your deck for any attack reaction, banish it face up, and shuffle your deck, and you can play that attack reaction in this chain link. So you can you turn your deck into a toolbox. If you need Go Again on your something, you need something like a Glint the Quicksilver, get a Glint the Quicksilver. If you don't have any more resources left, but you need to give your weapon a buff, Ironsong response. If you need to go more over the top, over your opponent's blocks, and you got some resources lying around, if you got 1 resource, Out for Blood. If you got more than that, something like an Overpower or a Route. It's just good. And yeah, it's just very solid. Or, another thing that you could search up if you need it, Twinning Blade. A 0-cost thing that just allows you to attack with your weapon an additional time. If your thing has Go Again. It's basically a Dorinthea effect, once per turn effect, but the weapon does not have to hit. So if Twinning Blade and something like a Glint the Quicksilver get together, which is a very well-known combo throughout all Flesh and Blood for those of you newer players, you play a Glint the Quicksilver, on your Dawn Blade, giving it Go Again. Then you have a Twinning Blade, you play it on your Dawn Blade, you can attack with it an additional time, come in with Dawn Blade an additional time, just like you would if Dorinthea's effective gone off. But now it doesn't have to hit, which is why Twinning Blade's so good, and why it's just a 3-of in every Dori deck, pretty much ever. Especially Dawn Blade versions. Then that is the deck. I mean, the rest of the deck is basically blue attack reactions, Ironsong response, Overpower blues, and then Precision plus Press blue, which is basically an attack reaction speed way to get Go Again, and maybe some extra power if your opponent's blocking with an equipment. But yeah, this is the main version of the deck. It's got tons of resources. Your deck needs a lot of resources because it's a very resource intensive deck. It can be very simple where you're just like, okay, I'm gonna spend a resource, attack with Dawn Blade, and then play this something like worst case scenario, a 1-cost Go Again effect like Warrior's Valor, and boom, I've spent 2 resources and I've pitched a blue. And then let's say Dawn Blade hits somehow, and then boom, I spend another resource and I come with Dawn Blade again. It can be like you use 2 cards from your hand and you block with 2 cards on your opponent's turn. You can have turns like that, but primarily what the deck's wanting to do is wanting to play a ton of stuff in one turn setup and just do tons of big crazy things in one turn, which is why there's so many resources, because you need a lot of resources to be able to do that in this deck, especially because while the deck does have a massive amount of 0-cost cards, there are a lot of 1-cost cards too. And unless you're using the Courage Blade hold for that massive combo turn, you also have to spend a resource to attack with Dawn Blade every time that you're wanting to attack with Dawn Blade that turn, depending on how wide you're going. So, that is the main deck. Then there's the inventory, which is, like I said earlier, mostly Enigma help. It also helps with some other stuff, but still. A huge defensive package. 3 Sink Belows, because, I mean, Sink Below is awesome. 2 Steel Blade Shunts, because if you need it, you need it bad against some big boy decks like Guardians or Brutes. Steel Blade Shunt is amazing. Take It on the Chin is just a really powerful card. It prevents a little bit of damage and can get you some go again if you need it. It's a really solid card. 1 copy of Ironsong Pride, because against decks that don't really block as much, this card is actually absurdly powerful. And I mean, Ironsong Pride, it's an awesome card. It gives a little bit of a permanent buff, and yeah, it's just nuts. So it can destroy itself and all the +1 power counters on your Dawn Blade, but considering what it does for 1 resource, it's powerful. Then there's Chorus of the Ironsong. This card is the Enigma, anti-Enigma strategy. This is an attack reaction, something that you can search up with Singing Steel Blade. I want to make that note. And then Chorus of the Ironsong is a 1-cost warrior attack reaction that until the end of turn gives target Dawn Blade +1 power, and damage that would be dealt cannot be prevented from the Dawn Blade. And then if it blocks with another card from your hand, you create an amount of courage tokens equal to the number of heroes, or under any number of heroes control. Basically, you can create a courage token. But the important thing is that Chorus of Ironsong can make damage that would be dealt by Dawn Blade unpreventable. Meaning all those ward things under Enigma's control do not matter. This card is cracked against Enigma, especially considering that this deck runs 3 copies of the card that tutors this thing up. So that is the anti-Enigma kind of package. It's not a lot, but it's actually a lot more than you think. It's essentially there are going to be 6 copies of this card if you put it into your deck because of what's the name of the card? Singing Steel Blade. Because Enigma is usually blocking with cards from your hand to make sure that some of their ward stuff doesn't go away, or just blocking with something like a Sink Below or Fate Foreseen. Not always going to be from hand, sometimes it will be from Arsenal, but a lot more stuff is being used from the opponent's hand, from an Enigma player's hand than you would think to block, which is why Singing Steel Blade works so well in combination with this card against Enigma, because it's always going to be doing some work. Then there's just a little bit of a Arcane Barrier package, Null Room Boots, Gloves, and Head, because out of all the stuff that you want to get rid of, the thing that you want to get rid of the least is Courage Blade Hold, because this card just, I mean, no matter what you're doing, if you're playing against something that deals arcane damage, you still want to have this card available to you to have those massive power turns. While Braveforge Bracers can get a lot more advantage in the long run against Arcane Barrier decks, this card is usually always going to be more valuable, which is why I don't have a chest version of Arcane Barrier. But that's the deck. I hope you all enjoy this deck. It's a really fun deck. It's a really powerful deck for how little it costs. I mean, $160 is $160. I get it. But considering what it does, I would say that it is worth it if you want to get a budget deck and you want to get into Classic Constructed and you want to not break the bank. This is one of the better decks to do it. There is Kyle out there. I've done a video for Kyle. He is a really powerful and honestly the best budget deck out there. But Dorinthea is an option if you don't want to do Kyle. And I just wanted to put it out there into the world, basically. But anyways, with all that aside, make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. It's completely free, on guys. Hope you're all enjoying Flesh and Blood videos. Hope you're all enjoying the last couple of days, weeks of this year. Enjoying some amazing Flesh and Blood. See you next time, everybody.